Again, if you happen to see me cringe a few times, it's simply because there's a piranha in canine form harassing my feet. Okay, yeah, so about 6,000 girls. Of course, the girls and the boys were kept separately in separate institutions, as were the morals of those times. Um, we are more concerned about what happened in the girls' hospices in those times. Um, Now, obviously, when such an infant was now taken in by one of these hospices or hospitali, they had to give the girl a name. So obviously, they gave whatever name they fancied the nuns in whose hands the infants were. Um, to this day, we have the names of some of these girls. Michaeletta, so little Michaela, who became one of the best violinists in the whole of Italy. Also Chiaretta, another brilliant violinist. I'm just talking about girls in the Pieta. You will understand why later. Lucietta, etc., etc. Now the question was what surnames would they have? Because obviously they didn't have a father or a mother. They didn't know who their father or their mother was. So, they couldn't take or adopt the surname of their father or their mother. So what happened? The instrument that they played became their surnames. And again, we've got documentary evidence for this, so I'll give you some names and surnames. Michieletta del Violin, Chiaretta del Violin, Lucietta dalla Viola, Adriana dalla Tiorbo. The tiorba, the tiorba is the tiorba or the achiliutu is a very big lute, which was used often in orchestras as well. Caterina del Cornetto, Silvia del Violino, Luciana Organista. So what happened? These girls, which arrived at the ospedali, when they grew up, they were tested for musicality. If they were musical, they then received musical tuition in all possible instruments from the best possible musicians that they could find in the whole of Italy. That is why Vivaldi, his first job, his first real appointment was at the Spieta. I'll return to that. Just interesting, all the girls of the ospedali were called di commune, so of the community, or the commune. If they were chosen to take music lessons, they were called the girls of di coro, of the choir, but coro in Italian means any musical group, so it could also be a group of instruments. And then the very best ones were called the privileged of the coro, privilegiate de coro. So the very best ones like Michieletta, etc., they also got and received special treatment. Right. There were also some very famous singers, or girls who eventually became very famous singers, who lived in the Pieta. For example, there was La Bolognese, in other words, the girl from Bologna, Apollonia, Angeletta, little angel, literally what it means. Right. Now, these institutions, very quickly, because of their intense music training, became the very best music making facilities in the whole of Europe. Their only rival was the Royal Ensemble of the King of France, Les 80 Violons du Roi, the 24 strings of the king, in other words, the string orchestra of King Louis XIII or XIV. But even so, people who had heard both groups, or the King's group and then various girls' orchestras in Venice, most of them felt that the girls were better. So these girls formed the best orchestras, and these orchestras became the best orchestras in the whole of Europe. And the same goes for individual players. Anna Maria, who was one of the other Ospedali, was compared with Tartini. Now, you know, Tartini was the most famous violinist of his time. He wrote the so-called Devil's Stroll Sonata, which is quite worthwhile to listen. And that was an opinion given by Charles de Brosse. He was one of these visiting people who especially traveled to Venice to hear all the music. And that was his comment in 1739. There was also another visitor, Keisler, another musician, who said that La Bolognese, the girl from Bologna, was the best singer in Europe. And she was still, you know, well, in her teens, most probably. Right. These girls achieved pop status. They were talked about in the streets or on the canals. People were arguing about who is the best violinist, who is the best singer. I won't give you quotes, you will find it in notes that I will give you later. But they quickly became the best players and musicians in the whole of Europe. I will read you an excerpt from another traveling journal written by Tolstoy in 1698, 5 years before Vivaldi got his appointment. In Venice, there are convents where the women play the organ and other instruments and sing so wonderfully that nowhere else in the world could one find such sweet and harmonious songs. Therefore, people come to Venice from all parts of the world to refresh themselves with these angelic music and songs. So that's a very interesting quote. Now, it was at this institution, the Pieta, Ospedale della Pieta, that Vivaldi got his first appointment at the age of 25 in 1703. By the way, his salary was 5 ducats per month. I actually don't know what the equivalent would be today. I'm coming back to that as well. The amazing thing is, okay, he was appointed to be their violin and viola lecturer, but he was also appointed to write and to compose music for these girls, either in a solo context, you know, a solo sonata or whatever, and also for the orchestras. Now, all of Vivaldi's instrumental works and all his sacred works for choir and orchestra over all the years were written for the girls of the Pieta. The only exception were his operas. Operas, of course, was a secular thing. Most Italian, especially Italian Baroque composers, always saw opera and the composition of opera as being their main pursuit in life. That's actually quite ironic. So a lot of these composers saw their writing instrumental music only as something incidental, coming second to their efforts to write opera. And of course, ironically today, most of these composers' operas are forgotten, but we still remember and love and enjoy their instrumental works. Vivaldi wrote more than 40 operas. Have any one of you heard any Vivaldi opera? Albinoni wrote more than 40 operas. Well, Handel wrote, I think, also about 30 or 40 operas. We don't know their operas, but we know their instrumental works. Another interesting fact, it's also very sad that Tchaikovsky, who was one of the greatest instrumental composers of the Romantic era, always saw his own main musical pursuit as the composition of opera. He tried his whole life to write a successful opera, and he only wrote one. And how many of you know anything about the opera? Eugene Onegin, or Eugen Onegin, which is the Evgeny Onegin, which is the Russian pronunciation. Okay, I think that's enough for now. Take 5, and then we'll carry on.